Welcome to Comic Contenders, where we compare one Singaporean and one international comic title of the same theme and tell you whether we think they deserve the hype. To add some extra special credibility to the mix, we also have a subject matter expert. I'm your host Viency, and I'm here with my co-host Lingying and our special guest Clio Ding. Yay!
Thank you for inviting me.
Welcome. Comic Contenders is a new segment of Red Dot Comics Den, our Singapore comics community podcast. In this segment, what we want to do is to introduce new titles, new comic book titles to you from Singapore and from beyond. And hopefully, if you have read these books before, we'd like to know what you think about these titles, and we'll like to invite you to leave your comments in the comments below. Share with us what you think about these books.
Our theme for today is webcomics, and the two very special superstar titles we have for today is Adulthood is a Myth by Sarah Andersen, and the second one is Kopi and Matcha by Evangeline, or maybe you might know her as EvaComics. So for those who may have watched our previous episode, we were also very lucky to have featured her in Comic Contenders as well. Yeah, so very excited to talk about these two titles today. And of course we have Clio Ding, who I have yet to introduce. So she's an art educator. Right now she's working at ACJC and helping to teach A-level art, and also she is the creator of 4-panel comic series Kevin. So maybe you can showcase some of your comics as well.
This is Kevin. It's basically a 4-panel gag strip about a dinosaur and aliens and magical ninjas and ice cream, that sort of nonsense. It was initially published online via TCZ Studios' own internal webcomic platform. You can also find it on Webtoon and my social media pages. Apart from Kevin, I also have another series. It's called Libera Nos A Malo, which is Deliver Us from Evil in Latin. So it's a action-packed, absurd story about this cyborg exorcist and his overqualified assistant, and they go around solving paranormal problems. Yeah, you can also find this on Webtoon.
I love it. I love that his assistant is the one that's overqualified. Yeah, so today, the reason why we have you today is because you have such familiarity with writing and also drawing relatable comics, and this is what we're really showcasing today, like relatable web comics. And maybe Clio, we can talk a little bit about what kind of web comic are we looking at today? Like, what is so unique or special about it?
Okay, today we are looking at two titles. One is by our local creator Eva, and the other one is international creator Sarah Andersen. Both of these comics were initially published online and gained popularity via social media, and then only after that, then they are collated into book form and published. So I guess this is the similarity, that primarily these are meant to be consumed online and possibly via the mobile platform.
Yeah, so both of them began getting their following on Instagram, and Eva also has a very, very strong following on Facebook as well. Like right now, in terms of following, if you're really talking about it, Sarah Andersen actually has 4.3 million on Instagram alone. And for Eva, she has up to 157,000 across both Facebook and Instagram. So honestly, it's really, really impressive for both of them to be able to through simple, relatable webcomics reach such a massive platform.
Yeah, I think one thing to add also is that these two comic creators, they've been big for many, many years. So they're not even the Instagram generation kind of webcomic creator. They're the Facebook generation.
Yes.
Kind of popular rival webcomic creator. So I think it's great that we're talking about it today, because
exactly.
I think their work has been around for 10 years and it's still, circulating around and memes. It's just really, really popular, and I think quite important to recognize.
Yeah, exactly. Especially because if we have comic creators watching or any artist, how challenging it is to kind of maintain your presence online for a really, really long time and remain seen, right? But then these guys, they somehow have cracked the code, and they have managed to, keep an audience entertained for so long. And these two books are kind of representative of the first comics that they really put out. Because, I will admit that they're not the newest titles, right? So this is the first book, Sarah Andersen's first book in her Sarah Scribbles collection, and it compiles all of her comics from her webcomic like series. I know like you said that you read most of her stuff online.
Yeah, through Tumblr. I just googled it and then go to the first one.
Exactly. And then like most of her stuff kind of document, you know, the horrors and awkwardness of young modern life. So they look at things like body image issues, self-consciousness, a lot of introversion, which I think like a lot of, you know, book readers, comic creators might relate to. I know I do. And it's a lot of highly relatable and even very deeply hilarious stuff, that the way that she's able to take small moments in her life and make it so funny. So that's what Sarah Andersen really does. And then when you move on to EvaComics, right? So this particular one is also her first book when she published Eva, Kopi and Matcha. So Eva, Kopi and Matcha is published in 2014. Yes. Yeah. So this is her second book, and then after that she goes on to do other books as well. So Eva goes solo. But this was the first one. So it came out in 2014 and it was a compilation of like the comics that she put online at that point. And it was a comparison of lighthearted like comics which showcase the cultural differences between Japan and Singapore. And she describes it quite funnily as what she says that she's approaching these cultural differences with an what she calls a auntie mindset.
Yeah.
Then when you read the comic, you're like, actually I can see it. Because the auntie mindset is like the straightforward, why is it like that? You know, that kind of like
I think it's a very I feel like she puts a very unique kind of lens on the things. So you know, like being an auntie is something that everyone can relate to. As in, you may not outwardly present yourself as an auntie, but I think, you know, things like caring about, you know, like something so expensive, you know, like why is it so hot? Why is the weather so uncomfortable? Why does the clothing run so small in some countries?
The Singaporean mindset of complaining. I'm not saying that like saying necessarily that Eva is complaining a lot, but it's more of like we have it all a little bit in ourselves, that we are sometimes like, we go overseas, right, and then we're like, why is this place like that? Then I compare to my home, I compare to Singapore. I recently went overseas and I went to Scotland, so I just kept comparing the weather there and then the weather here. And this is really what this book kind of captures, you know, that sense of trying to find familiarity in a foreign place, and then also trying to think about, also self-reflect about even your own home lah, like Singapore, what it is about. Yeah, so it's very interesting. It's very interesting. It's a very day-to-day kind of self-deprecating look at the mismatches between two red dots. So before we dive into talking about the content properly, we'll start with our rating first. So, just to give you guys an introduction about our special rating system here at Comic Contenders, we have 3 special ratings. Okay, we're not doing 5 stars. We're not doing it against, you know, a rating of 10. We have 3. So the first one is can lah. So what does it mean? It means it was okay. It means this was a moderately enjoyable read. And then the second one is best. So that means I like it a lot. I had a good time. But then the last one is shook. So what that is, it means that this is amazing. You know, I felt my soul leave my body. Like, this is a memorable experience, basically. So now we're gonna start with our ratings.
Actually, even though Viency shared like what our guidelines are for the rating system, you're welcome to also use your own personal discretion. I think everyone that has come on the show before, they have had different kind of standards.
They might feel best, might represent different things to them. Like shook can be different. Like shook can be like for some it will be like, oh, really really good, or it can feel like I can't say shook. It feels like shook is way too out of my like rating system. That kind of thing. It's up to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe does it help like define what my criteria are?
You can.
Yeah, so for shock, you mentioned that it's life-changing. So you know, Singaporeans, we always get A for everything, right? So actually A means it's really, really fantastic. So the average should be a good is a B. So I think that the best is already quite good.
Yes.
Yeah,
The shook
that's
is
true.
like 1 in a million kind of thing. Yeah. And then can lah means that it's enjoyable.
Pass.
Yeah, like
Pass.
a pass kind of thing. It's not bad. If I find it can lah, it doesn't mean that it loses out objectively because it has to do with my personal preference of a certain aesthetic style or subject matter,
Yeah.
which I will tell you why.
Yeah, disclaimer,
great.
this is all personal preference. That's what happens with like book
Yeah,
reviews.
so the authors won't come after me and then threaten me.
It's like
I
all
don't-
the Sarah Andersen fans would be like, how
Yeah.
dare you?
Yeah, I mean, but honestly, if I think what we want to know also is like, are there people watching this show who are like, nah, these books are crap? I think we want to know as
I actually
well.
want to know. I mean,
Yeah.
if you do think these books are crap, that can be quite funny also. Just leave a comment.
Yeah, we
And
welcome all
it's
like,
good.
honest, meaningful reviews.
Yeah, just let us know. Okay, so let's have a think about Sarah Andersen, our rating for her, and then we all hold it up after 3, 2, 1, okay? Okay, and then 3, 2, 1. Right, everybody's the same. Woo, best. Okay, then
Best
let's
is a
start
B.
with Clio, of course, our subject expert.
Okay, what I find enjoyable about hers is that she's able to just use lines and just black and white. She doesn't even need to have colors to portray the essence of the concept. So I do find that, if you can say something without too much effort, then why do you then need all these additional things? So that's what I find is interesting. And then her character design has a certain funny aesthetic. She looks like a goldfish. Yeah, with the eyes like that. So with a simpler character design, it's easier for the readers to project themselves into the story, rather than you have something that is designed to very closely resemble the artist. Then perhaps it is a little bit harder to step into the shoes of the artist.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned about the simplicity of it is quite important. Like, even though it's very, I mean, when you at first glance you're like, oh, this is just black and white doodly kind of drawings. It looks very casual, looks very effortless. Then you're like, actually, it's very, very hard to achieve that. I mean, if you draw
So
or
hard.
like you create art, you're like, you definitely, the less is more is quite, quite hard to come by.
You gotta know what to simplify, and sometimes once you know what to simplify, or your choice of what you want to simplify becomes your style in some ways. Yeah, for me, I have a very hard time knowing what to simplify, because even when I draw, they ends up being like very, very, I tend towards the more realistic side. Then the simplifying becomes quite challenging.
Yeah, and not just the simplification of characters, there's also a choice of what scene do you choose to present and what is the magic that goes in between the panels. What do you leave out? Yeah.
Oh, we should go into that later. The magic of the panels.
This sounds solid art of education.
Yes.
art
Scott
criticism
McCloud.
going on.
Everybody should read Scott McCloud.
Oh yes, Scott
Us,
McCloud.
yeah, for sure. I would say that like following those principles like Scott McCloud and or that this is very technically sophisticated, even though it looks very simple.
Yes, exactly. Okay, then let's talk about your rating.
So I gave it a best. I really like Sarah's Scribbles. I've been reading it since since I was very young. And I relate a lot to her drawings. I relate a lot to the character that she portrays. So yeah, that's why I put it as a best. Why is it not shook? I would say it's because I think, in a way, she has a lot of comics, and like not every single comic for me is like a hit lah. So if you ask me, I would say like actually there are some parts of her comics, like there are some memes that are very, very popular. Those I would say, those are shook. But I think as a whole, looking at her book, especially the Adulthood is a Myth theme that this book is about. It's about all her adulting comics. I would say it's best. It's the best for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a similar experience of her book also. So it's like a best for me because I also mostly experienced this online on Tumblr. I remember there's that point where these comics were really blowing up. That was actually kind of like in the 2010s. And you kind of can see all these comics online, on Tumblr, on multiple social media platforms. And that's where I was reading mine. And I really wanted, for some reason at that point, the printed versions of this book. I wanted Ellie Broche don't know if you guys know Ellie Bro. She also had like very similar kind of like millennial adulting humor, also about depression, mental health. Very interesting. And it was very, very relatable. I remember like just reading the comics, but it's also best for me because, how to say, I find these comics very funny and I love it. But I think in terms of preference, my shook has lied with very narrative-based stuff. Like story-based things that have a bit of a longer like through line, because they're also short form that they all don't necessarily leave the strongest impact always, like across everyone. So if you read one, you're like, oh, this is really good, and that kind of like after a while, it becomes just like a lot of small bits and pieces of this is funny, but never like a, oh my god, like wow, I felt like, you know, my life changed. I'm gonna stay up all night reading this. Yeah.
I mean,
it's a different experience.
Yeah. I think it's like, for me, when I see in a book format, right, then I start thinking of like Peanuts, you know, Calvin and Hobbes, and Baby Blues, and like, you know, those comic strips that were running in newspapers, and those I read in collections also. And I would say somehow, sadly, I think like the webcomic experience, like, you know, it's different. Yeah, I think it's different. Like, I think if I had to choose between my Peanuts collection and a Sarah Andersen collection, you know, of course it's different. You know, like the consistency of the work, like the maturity of the artist, the age of the artist is different. But I would pick my Peanuts lah. Yeah, I just love Snoopy and Peanuts, and Calvin and Hobbes also. Yeah.
Actually, Eva Nyo very inspired by Peanuts. Yeah. Like it was one of the things that she mentioned, one of her interviews. Fun fact. Yeah, so they, and also another fun fact is like for Adulthood is a Myth, her character design is actually inspired by the shirt. The guy, what's his name? Kelvin, I guess, the boy, right?
Yeah, the boy.
So he wears a striped shirt, and this is why like her character actually has a striped shirt as well. So she's very inspired by Calvin and Hobbes.
Well, I thought it's the Finding Waldo also.
Also, it does have a little bit, right? Yeah, so that kind of like you're saying, that kind of comic strips that we all come to know and love, Peanuts, Calvin and Hobbes, they have very strong influences on webcomics as well, because they have a very similar short form, day-to-day kind of format. Yeah. And I think now that I've mentioned Eva's comic, let's go into rating that as well. 3, 2, 1. Oh, okay, so our usual rule here is the odd one out goes first.
Am I the?
Yes. So you'll go off first again.
Okay, first disclaimer, can lah doesn't mean it's bad. Okay, can lah is very good. But because we are doing a comparison, and then I'm comparing it based on design and the efficiency of the storytelling. That means how much line do you use to say the same concept. So I do find that for Eva, Kopi and Matcha, the story itself is really interesting. The colouring is exquisite. I would want to have a book and pay this price if it's full coloured, rather than like black and white. But one thing I noticed is that there is a lot of things going on. My art teacher mode is kicking in. But yeah, there's a lot of things which might have been more simplified, because when I draw, I also realize I'm spending like 5 hours just drawing this one frame, where somebody could just doodle a line and it has the same impact. Yeah, so that's what I find probably technically, aesthetically, that Sarah Andersen's one is more easily digestible from a reader's perspective. But of course, technically, she has excellence in terms of colours and all this.
Yeah, I think it's very, you know, we should really point out like Eva's comics are like completely on a different level in terms of the detail, the colouring that she has. It's not as, I think where she's coming from is I feel like her influence is more of manga. Yeah. So it's like very high quality drawing. Whereas like for Sarah Andersen, it's like you know, like she can get away with doing what appears to be very little. You know, like it looks really effortless. And you know, both, it's just different style. I feel it's like I wouldn't say one is stronger or better than the other.
Yeah. So is that your explanation for your best rating as well?
Yeah, that's why I found it like, I feel like it's like comparing apple and orange, you know, like you can't really say which one is better. So I gave both of them the best rating. For Eva, especially, like I like the cultural context, that specificity. I would say that, like say the adulthood is a myth, relatable factor for me is not very high nowadays. I think because I've been adulting for so many years. But then the like Singapore versus Japan cultural difference, Singaporeanness, that kind of relatability for me is like evergreen. Yeah, so I like that a lot about Eva's comics.
Yeah, for me it's a best also because I find that like, okay, she has a bit more variety in terms of the kind of comics that she is like the kind of paneling that she uses, the kind of storytelling that she employs across like multiple comics. So for Adulthood is the Myth is fairly straightforward. She just uses like, one panel like that, right? It's like sometimes she has 5, has 3. You can imagine this as like Instagram posts, right? Then she'll just, have it all on one square. It's very straightforward. But for her, like, she does this thing. She has some where she has multiple panels, and then directly you can see one that just has 2. And the way that she sets up the story will be very different. So the way she will set up like a 2-panel one, like the payoff and the setup and the payoff is, compared to her longer form stuff, is they have different, she employs different skills, different storytelling methods. So it's quite interesting, like the way that she did that. So for me, that was the best. Yeah, but once again, is a best also cause like I'd say it's the similar reason to Sarah Andersen. Really, I think I find that like I'm a long form like a long form girly. So yeah,
I do find that
stick around with like. Oh yeah, go ahead.
You're saying some long form.
No, yeah, I'm just saying I'm a long form girly.
Yeah, that's fine. I think it's like sometimes what you go into a book for is like like you want something very intense, like something very long drawn out, like something you can really chew on. And then of course webcomics, is a bit different. Webcomics is like you have a funny meme and then you send it to your friend, and then like the whole experience is like completely different. So I think we need to like emphasize that as well. We're not rating the like it's really about your own personal preference, and of course there's a place for everything, right? Yeah.
Can't say that this is an objective, It's hard to say. Most ratings are not objective lah. So it will always be based on the personal taste thing.
Actually, that's the point of this show. We're really subjective. All of our opinions are very biased. So
but
we really
like,
want people to
what we
weigh in.
hope to do is like get you interested to read it. Because honestly, these comics, like today we're talking about webcomics, right? They employ very interesting like perspectives, comic storytelling formats, So as always, like you should check it out and make your own kind of decision. Yeah, so now that we've had our rating, right, I think we can kind of dive into the story proper. And I know that just now you also talked about the magic of the paneling, so I'm very interested to hear more about that. But before that, I think let's talk about the story first lah, and the kind of stories that they've depicted within each book. Like how insightful do you find like some of the observations that both creators have documented within your stories?
So what we're talking about here is really the writer's perspective, and whether or not I find it like relatable or not. I would say that I think both creators, they have like a very unique voice and like the unique perspective on the things that they're observing, which is like society, right, and like themselves. I would say that the Sarah Scribbles one is much more. It's really about adulting. So that means that her perspective is like this young person who's like trying to find herself and like still kind of lazy but still has to function. Like just not really a fully grown adult yet. So I feel like she can convey that very well. Like the character design is like this, like this girl with messy hair and like googly eyes, still has that very kid aura, but it's like kind of forced to do like functional things. So I kind of like that storyline. I just feel like it's really good for young people.
Yes.
Yeah, which was when I started reading it.
She drew it when she was fairly young as well. Like she started her kind of online comic illustration career, I think when she was 19 and in university. So, and Sarah Scribbles is like her first collection. So I do think it reflects like the kind of like the age that she was in at that point in time. There are some stories that continue to remain relatable. I think I'm still at the start of my adulting phase because I graduated from uni a while So some of her stories are still quite relatable, but I also noticed that I'm slowly aging out of the relatability of this kind of comic. I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but yeah, I think for me, one thing that I found very insightful about both of these, yeah, Nadra's book, it is
Nadra's copy is signed.
signed.
Whoa, guys, it's very valuable.
She has met Sarah Andersen.
It's a very valuable book then.
Yeah, one thing I felt like I've learned from these two is that they are able to take very, very simple moments in life and make it funny, make it interesting. The things that you, on your day-to-day life, right, you don't notice. You kind of just live your life like, today I go to work, I woke up in the morning, I go to a bus stop. And during all these little, your journey in your day-to-day life, there are little moments that will stand out. For me, I don't notice them. I'm not as intentional as they are. Like, they very clearly pay attention to what they're doing in their life. And I found that I was able to, it was quite inspirational for me in terms of okay, I need to be more intentional about small moments. Because then, because generally, if not, I will kind of zombie fight, live my day-to-day life not knowing what the hell's going on. And then the day before, you ask yourself what did I do? And then you kind of forget. These guys are visually documenting their day-to-day lives, like a diary. So I found that quite nice lah. Yeah. So quite inspirational.
Yeah, I think it's something that when the social media era kind of began, right? And then you see people doing things like posting holiday photos, posting wedding photos. There's a lot of high production value stuff. So something like a doodle comic, which is I woke up out of bed this morning and then I went back to sleep because I didn't feel like getting out of bed. Something like that level of realness actually is very refreshing. So that's why I feel I really for me, my social media diet and whatnot, I really like to include a lot of webcomics because I think comic creators, they can just convey something different. It's not I'm going to grow, I'm going to get promoted at my job, I'm going to be a successful person. A lot of comics are really I am not a successful person. I am a comic artist. I stay at home and play video games all day long or whatever, right? And I'm that's great. I'm happy that we have a place to celebrate and relate to this kind of people, and that's more real to me, that kind of content. Yeah. So that's what I like about webcomics. Yeah, nothing, this adulthood is a myth thing. I really believe that it's, adults don't have it figured out. People are still messed up and try just take things one day at a time, and that's okay.
Yeah. So Clio, what do you think?
Yeah, I think they are similar in the sense that both took a semi-autobiographical approach. They feature themselves as the character, but the key difference is for Sarah's comic is more focused on her individual thoughts and feelings. So if you notice, right, there isn't much background. If you flip through, all is about her, and then there's very minimal things going on at the back. Whereas for Eva's one, even though she's a recurring character, but some of this is really social commentary, and she always take a distant observer kind of commentator in some of these issues that is highlighted, which tends to be a bit heavier. So this one is hilarious. It's I'm an introvert, I don't want to see people because people are so scary, that kind of stuff. Funnier, and then this one has a touch of seriousness in it. So I think that's the key difference, which also explains how come some have more details, how come some are less. Yeah, and they both have a very clear target audience who are millennials, younger millennials versus millennials. And this group is one of the biggest consumers for comic medium because we kind of grew up with the Sailor Moon generation. Then comic was popular at our time. Versus maybe the Gen Zs, they have other forms of distractions, not as good, not as big as a comic reader. So that's why I find successful. And then of course this one, the local content, very Singapore specific, so it sparks a lot of debate. Even the haters come and say, Singapore is not like this, but it generated traffic, it generated attention.
There's some controversy involved with
is Singapore always more jialat than Japan? It seems to have painted Japan as this very polite society, and the Singaporeans, we are savages. But then she do have moments where she shows that she's quite appreciative of how convenient we are. The things are 24 hours open all the time.
Or like,
Yeah.
she was saying, there was a comic in here that she was talking about our banking, the differences in terms of banking in Japan and banking in Singapore, and saying that like, I remember complaining about, why bank close so early in Singapore? And then I found out in the comic that banks close even earlier, like 3 p.m. or something in Japan. I was like, how you do anything there at all? And then, she had the same perspective.
Yeah, I think like that the cultural difference is actually very interesting to get into. Like I feel like Eva, what she has done with her book is actually document both Singapore culture and Japanese culture. And then a lot of her drawings are very detailed, very beautiful. And then she has things like hawker scenes or like restaurant scenes. And then I'm very grateful for that, because I'm like, it's nice to see someone take that time to like really draw these things out and flesh it out and show people what the cultures are like. Yeah, so it's like two totally different books lah. The content that they convey, the learning, like I guess like the things that you take away from the reading experience is like totally different.
That's true. One of the similarities being they are both kind of simplified and easy to read, and they're posted online. Like, do you think that it's a pro or con that these comics are very simplified snapshots to such a degree, because they have to be accessible?
Yeah, what do you think about this actually? Because you also create 4-panel comics, right? So I just kind of wonder what you have to say about this. Because for example, right, people be like, maybe they'll look at it and be like, it's so easy. But actually it's not, right? Like it takes a lot of thinking and like writing to capture like a whole story in only 4 panels. So yeah, I'm very curious, like what's your perspective on
4-panel comics, right?
Yeah, 4-panel or like even 1-pager comics.
Okay, the key, the challenge of a comic is not like how well you draw, but how funny it is. So it is effective. If it's effective in evoking certain audience reaction, then you have succeeded. So it doesn't really matter how detailed or how skillful, traditionally skillful or realistic the drawing is. And it's very challenging to make something funny. Like, tell me a joke on the spot. It's so hard, right? So I think I respect a lot for comic artists who are able to day just generate materials that are funny. And you have to do it consistently so that there's no fillers in between. That's really challenging. And then talking about webcomic, the other challenge that is often unseen, right, is the platform. What is the initial platform that made it famous? Because for Eva, she started using, I think, firstly on Facebook. So Facebook does not have a limit in the dimension, and she can have free reign of a lot of her layout like this, and she can have color. Then eventually she found that Facebook, the algorithm a little bit funny, right? Then she moved on to Instagram, and then Instagram will limit the size, and when you see, it's not so comic friendly for her work. So I do find that hers, right, as a webcomic, maybe in the current setting with our current mobile technology, doesn't really facilitate as much.
That's true.
Yeah, it works better as a book. I would read her work as a book. Whereas for Sarah Andersen's, because it's Tumblr, and it seems like the eventual size of the book is just to cater to like how the layout should work in a most affordable and accessible format, rather than hers is more like, I want to do a book, but then I want to digitize it to put it online. This is a digital approach. I'm making it for mobile scrolling format.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe they don't even start out thinking this way, but like this, if you put it on Instagram sliding format now, it's gonna work.
Yep.
Yeah. I think her current comics actually still look quite similar. Even if you go onto Insta right now, Sarah Andersen, it's like account.
Yeah.
It's still like scrollings, very simple stuff. So it still kind of works. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I feel this sort of thing, like as a reader, you don't really appreciate it, but like for the creators, it's such a big headache, really, to like kind of get the formula right. So this kind of like 4-panel comic thing, I'm really glad it still works on Instagram, because that's the main platform that I use. And I guess like you're right, like this is for now I think it's suitable for like Zillennials and Gen Z kids also, since they have now grown up into the adulthood era. But I think like for us millennial users, seeing this on Facebook and Tumblr was really like that was the day, man.
Yeah, now webcomics beyond webtoons can also be found on like TikTok, because people start posting comics on TikTok also. Like you can scroll on pictures on TikTok now. So, you know, I've started reading, like finding webcomics on TikTok even. So I think like they've started posting videos and reels, short reels of their own comics. So actually multi-format. So that's the thing about webcomics, right? In order to maintain your presence, you have to figure out ways to sort of be able to you not only understand the platform, then you have to figure out ways to keep making your content work with the algorithm and kind of speak to the audience. So both of them have kind of been able to master that with the experience that they've had on the platform for all these years.
Yeah. Actually, the sad thing is also like I think humor. Like humor, sometimes it can get affected by these formats. Because you know, like for example, when you slide, then like the payoff is very, I guess, fun. Yeah, because you slide the thing and you get the joke punchline immediately. Whereas you don't get that kind of suspense with like, maybe like if it's Facebook, the whole thing is there at one go. So yeah, I mean these things also kind of affect how we view and digest the content. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's worth noting that like I think Eva, for these books, like she drew the comics for the book. Yeah.
For the second one, yes.
For the second one, especially. Yeah. And so that
First
makes
one
a
is
big
a compilation.
difference. Yeah, that definitely makes a big difference.
So actually, I guess if you have the chance, you can take a look at the second book, see what's the difference. Yeah. Because a lot of these are new. Like she made it specifically for a book. So usually that actually affects the paneling quite a lot. And speaking of this, I want to go back to your initial how you mentioned about the magic of paneling. Yeah, I'm interested to see your analysis about Sarah Andersen's comic and even also Eva's as well.
Okay, so when you learn comic traditionally, paper-based comics, you always think, okay, this book, we look at it as not as just one page, not as just one panel. We see the layout of the entirety of the page as a page spread. So usually you will put some kind of funny things or cliffhanger right here so that it is a page turner. This works for multiple pages, narrative kind of comic, and is more apparent in manga than the Marvel DC kind of storytelling format, which tend to have a bigger page, then a lot of things going on. Yeah. So if you have grown up reading manga, it affects your techniques and then how you approach, how you create things. So this can be seen in how traditional it resembles a manga layout, other than the fact that it's a square rather than a rectangular thing. Whereas if you look at Sarah's one,
there's no page turner.
The entirety of the page isn't her priority. So it's just one panel and then the next panel. But then this one, right, I think that she's stronger in timing and pacing because it ends up more like an animation or a film where you can have one panel where the character is pausing and not saying or doing anything. But that is so effective. If you take away this, it's not so funny in terms of rhythm.
Yeah, it's it's like a different kind of
different technique.
Yeah, different technique.
Yeah, they have to pay attention to different things to cater to the kind of story that they're telling. And I think it's quite interesting, like if you were to read it yourself as well, you experience the difference as you're reading, whether there's a payoff at the end of a book, and see like psychologically how that affects yourself as well.
Yeah, and then now with webtoons, it's another whole can of worm.
Oh yeah, it is.
If you're used to drawing traditional pages like that, you got to reformat, and then you can't have a horizontal action where a character punches another one and then it flies through the door.
Yes.
You got to tilt the phone. So all these technical issues that comes with what platform you're publicizing on is becoming more of a challenge now.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
creators.
And then like today we are talking about comics that were eventually published into books, and they've started on Facebook and Instagram.
Digital
but now there's a lot of like you said, webtoons, right? And even then they've also started moving like not just paying attention to, let's say, the format on webtoons. Once they start publishing it into print form, the way they have to lay it out is also kind of challenging as well. Because when you do it on webtoons, it's a scrolling format. It's very lengthy. Everything, the panels are rectangular, squarish, and then how are you going to convert this into a print form? I was talking about this just now with the both of them, but I recently read the print version of Wayne's Family Adventures, and I was quite fascinated by how they were able to convert the webtoon scrolling format so well into a print format, and they had to basically repanel everything so that it fits on like your typical A5 comic book.
Wow,
kind of thing.
that's actually a lot of effort.
It's a lot of effort. It's basically redoing storytelling. Yeah. So here, I mean, it's quite straightforward. They didn't have to do it that much because they kind of take the whole graphic and just go, paste it in the book, right? But I think as continue to read more and more print books, published books of webcomics online, you might start to see different form, like this kind of considerations that the comic artist has to think about when publishing their work. So it's a lot of multi-formatted work that we're looking at that is actually quite interesting to think about.
Yeah,
and even the
definitely.
positioning of the balloons, because these ones people don't actually pay a lot of attention to, but balloons and words take up space. And in Japanese manga, that space is very important. But for webtoon, it's usually pushed to the margins.
Yes.
So when you reformat it, you got to bear in mind, is there enough space within your panels to cater to the positioning of your word balloons? Because that's part of the composition. Your eyes would go from where the character is looking at the head and then go to the speech balloon, and then it has to flow. Right? So if you disrupt that flow, it's going to end up a little bit awkward, which I do observe in Sarah Andersen's. When I first read it as a scrolling format, it makes sense, but then somehow it doesn't read as smoothly as a book. Probably because that was the vertical continuity is disrupted with the horizontal formality of the book.
So I guess that's something that didn't quite work for you in terms of like her comic as well. I see.
Yeah, I think like it's so like there's the webcomic and then there's the webcomic in the book format. Then you have to start looking at it with a different standard already. You're like, would I buy this book, or am I happy just sending the memes around and like looking at the very low res graphics on Instagram? That's a real big question.
Yes.
Like, will you pay money to have this book on your shelf? Even if you like the webcomic a lot. Yeah, so good question for us to think about lah. And also, like if something is a very successful webcomic, does that mean that it needs to be printed? Like we also
That's true.
like I think in the past comic creators they're like, I must have my book in a form. I must have a book eventually. But we also know that's not the only definition of like success.
Yeah.
For comic for sure.
Like everybody thinks the book is the kind of like the be all and all of like a comic creator's career, right? Yeah, but I think webcomics, even just the success of webcomics alone and seeing what else can come out of that is quite like the success can't just be defined anymore by a simple book already.
Yes.
Maybe they start adapting into different other formats, dramas or whatever, and you don't just have to kind of end your kind of like career at the book format. Yeah.
I have a question for publishers' perspective, because if you do a webcomic, you basically decide what format you are creating for, and it's dependent on the dimension that the app gives you. But for a comic book, how much does it how much input does the publisher have in terms of the size and the printing, the color, the cost? Do those actually come into consideration as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think like as a publisher, right, a very big consideration that we have, as in of course we have the temptation also when we see a very successful webcomic, we're like, wow, we should do this in print, like that would be very good. But then you have to look at the format, and then you will start to think like, maybe it won't work because the panels are like, very much for a webcomic style reader, or like for a sliding style reader. Maybe it won't work well on print. So those are definitely, and then also you have to ask the artist, are you comfortable to like make adjustments for us? You will really need to like redesign, repanel everything. So some are comfortable doing that, some they don't really want to because they are not interested in converting their work. So those are the considerations that we have lah. Actually, this was a project that had come up quite recently. Like we were talking to some webcomic creators and then possibly doing a book with them. So it's something that I think publishers think about a lot nowadays, because in a way the web has become like the big pool, the talent pool for comic artists. That's where we find artists that we want to eventually print also. There's the era of like a purely print comic artist it's basically over, right? Yeah, there's very few artists that work exclusively in print.
And the reality
nowadays.
also is a lot of publishers actually look to the presence of the creator first before publishing them.
Correct.
Although I mean, hopefully that's not always the case lah. And for us, we don't always focus on that as well. It's about the content, but the presence really helps. So when a comic creator has started their journey online first and they have that following, then it, like as a business perspective, in terms of business, there's a little bit less of a risk for the company to say like, oh, I will publish this book and be certain that there is a certain degree of success. Yeah. But this is like very technical stuff lah. In general, the hope is that we always focus on the content first. I mean, if the content is not good enough, like not great or whatever, then there's no point just kind of publishing a book like that, or it doesn't represent the publisher that well, then we shouldn't publish that book as well. Yeah. So that's just kind of the technical publisher side of things.
Yeah, anyway,
but that's a bit of a...
But it's important, we need to understand it, because as creators we are always left on our own to figure out what size and what not. So because in Japan, you know, it's through the comics magazine. So whichever publisher, whichever magazine, right, they have a clear guideline on who you should do the story for. It's gender based and age group based.
Yeah.
So if you are pitching like for Shogakukan, it's different from the more adult ones.
Yeah.
So you know exactly. But then for in your local context or even more international ones, right, there are so many different formattings.
Yes.
So unless you do a comic anthology and you say we want to print out A4, then you can decide, okay, finally I want to do the layout like this. But if it's web, then eventually you have too much choices.
Too many choices. Agree.
For web, I mean, usually for creators who do webcomics, there has been the consideration that like if you really want to do a book in the future, then the way that you draw, even if it's for webtoons, even if it's for Insta, you might have to think a little bit about how you're going to translate that into a book form, even at the start, like when you're drawing it already, because it makes your job a little easier if in the future you do end up printing that book. I think a lot of creators now, I mean, we've spoken to a local creator who they are publishing their very, very popular webcomic into a book form, and all these things are very, like, things that they have to pay attention to lah. So ultimately, I think what you've asked in terms of questions is quite important as well.
Yeah, but I think it kind of reminds me, I would say now like, you know, something like a 4-panel comic. It's just a very pure format. Yeah, like I think if people are wondering like where to start, or, you know, even like publishers are wondering what to look out for online, you can't go wrong with a 4-panel, you know, like newspaper gag strip kind of format. In a way that will never go out of style. Yeah, because it's just so, I guess, so common, and like so I guess like there's so many masters working in this format, right? And then you will know that there's always a place for comic strips in that, you know, 4-panel layout. Yeah. I think maybe that's a good starting point.
Yeah, I think with that, sounds like a good place for us to have our final comments about the book before we wrap up. So, any last words about these two books?
I think if you call yourself a comic fan, please go and buy local books and support them. Yeah.
Okay,
it's very heartening to see something that is culturally familiar, because we have been consuming a lot of imports, and then sometimes we feel culturally alien to the kind of maybe the specific context, political or moral or even religious context behind some of these like popular superhero or Japanese manga kind of stuff. Something feels weird. So it's good to have more local authors publishing their work, and the only way to make it happen is for us to purchase and support them.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, and I think actually Eva's formula of like, it's not even just about being a local person. I think it's also like, it's not about being a Singaporean person. I think it's also about like just that feeling of alienation that I think a lot of people experience when they go to Japan. I feel like she captures that really well. Like I'm sure people from everywhere around the world, like Japan has a very, very interesting and very strong kind of cultural feel, and being able to like kind of relate to someone who has also experienced that kind of, I would say like unfamiliarity is great. Yeah, so that's what I really like about Eva's book.
What about Sarah's for both of you?
Oh, okay. And then for Sarah's Scribbles, Scribbles, it will always have a special place in my heart. Yeah. I just really I just really love the character. For me, it's very nostalgic of like when I was like starting my adulting kind of journey. Yeah, so I'll just always love this book. I think, especially for like it's a good gift, like the and also the meme factor for a lot of her webcomics is still good. So definitely like love sharing it with my friends still. Yeah.
And I think physical book still has its charm. So even though it's not coloured, there's actually a texture on this furry things you can touch. Yeah, so buy a book and keep it on your shelf.
Yeah, it's like the texture of a sweater. It's so nice to feel when you actually get it. So this is a thing that you can't get with webcomics.
A book is an object of beauty.
Yes, indeed.
Well said.
Okay, so before we end, we actually have a very special gift for Clio. As thanks for you coming here today.
Oh, thank you so much.
No problem.
Can I open it?
Yes.
Unboxing.
Unboxing.
Yeah, unboxing.
Must have the over the top reaction and all that. They must. Hey, it's me.
It's
It's
so
me
cute.
with like Comic Den.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, who did the drawing?
Naja did the
Thank you so
drawing.
much.
Amazing.
Yes, it's really great.
It actually looks, the
Looks like
likeness
me.
is really good.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Super cute.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, thanks everyone for staying till the end and joining us today to talk about these two really, really great webcomics. If you like this video, make sure you comment and also subscribe to our channel and share it with your friends. And of course, if you want to follow us for more content like this, you can also join our Discord community where we give you regular updates about everything that's happening with Red Dot Comics then. So, we'll see you again next time. Bye guys!